and she's always available whenever she's called upon in any area in the church. It's no other person but Sister Aanu Odunaike. She is the one that is going to be talking to us today on real estate investment structure and legal consideration. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Please confirm you can hear me.
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Real estate investment, construction, and legal considerations. Sister Aanu is a senior associate and a member of Udoma and Bello Usaige's private equity, megas and acquisitions, real estate and construction, and corporate and commercial teams. In over 5 years of commercial practice, she has been involved in a wide range of matters, including general corporate advisory, fund formations, private equity, capital markets, real estate, energy and infrastructure, project finance, and litigation. Her extensive experience in private equity and megas and acquisitions has seen her advising on and structuring complex transactions, facilitating seamless negotiations, and ensuring regulatory compliance. She has a proven track record of representing clients in high-stakes deals, guiding them through the intricacies of acquisitions, mega and divestments, and the realm of fund formations. She has assisted in the establishment and registration of private equity and venture capital funds and fund managers with the Nigeria Securities and Exchange Commission, providing strategic counsels on legal and regulatory frameworks. Our real estate practice include advising on property acquisitions, leases, and development projects with a keen understanding of the legal nuances in the sector. Aanu has also been recognized as a recommended lawyer in the commercial, corporate, and M&A practice group in the Legal 500 EMEA 2024 rankings. Okay. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Just before Mr. Aanu comes up, let's hear from the media team to play the media song for us. Then after which we'll hear from Sister Aanu. Thank you.
I'm pressing on the upward way, new heights I'm gaining every day, still praying as I onward bound. Lord, plant my feet on higher ground. Lord, lift me up and let me stand by faith on heaven's stable land, a higher plane than I have found. Lord, plant my feet on higher ground.
My heart has no desire to stay where doubts arise and fears display. Though some may dwell where days abound, my prayer, my aim is higher ground.
Lord, lift me up and let me stand by faith on heaven's stable land, a higher plane than I have found. Lord, plant my feet on higher ground. I want to scale the my feet on higher ground.
Amen. Please confirm that you can hear me. Good evening, everybody.
Yes.
Good evening. We can hear you. Please go ahead.
Okay, great. So let's bow our heads as we pray before we start the session for today. Our Father in heaven, we give you all the glory, give you all the adoration. We thank you for another opportunity to share knowledge, to discuss, and to also fellowship in your presence. I pray, O Lord God, that you let your Holy Spirit speak through me, and that each and every one of us will be blessed today by your word. In just mighty name I have prayed. Amen.
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 Okay. So please let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, great. All right. So today I'm going to be speaking to us about real estate investment structures and legal considerations. I mean, so real estate is a very good asset for investments because it usually appreciates. It's not like a car that you buy and then you'd have to will typically depreciate because of just use and tear, right? So real estate is one of those assets that the people love to invest in because it's almost like guaranteed returns, except something really drastic happens to that property or the country in general. So for today, the outline for our session today is I'm going to go through overview of the real estate investment structures that are applicable, common investment structures. We discuss the key legal considerations, and then we'll conclude and add Q&A. So, real estate investment structures are different frameworks in which you can invest, manage, or profit from real estate assets. And choosing a real estate investment structure really depends on what are your financial goals, how involved do you want to be in the investment, what is your risk appetite, and what level of resources do you have. And each structure has its own implications for ownership rights, what are your liabilities, what you're exposed to, the tax implications, the liquidity of such structure. So when deciding how you want to invest in real estate, it's very important to look at all of those factors before you then make a decision. So let's get into the common real estate investment structures applicable in Nigeria. So we have direct ownership, joint ventures. We also have real estate investment trust, also slash real estate investment funds. There are more investment structures like public partnerships, private-public partnership, PPPs, but that's not really applicable to the audience. So I took that out of the presentation today. But these are the common investment structures that are applicable, or I feel like the audience will be able to relate to, because this is what you might encounter or see in your day-to-day lives, or also if you have businesses, etc. So direct ownership, it's quite straightforward. It's essentially an individual or an entity purchasing a real property asset. So either you purchase it in your name or you set up a company to then purchase that asset. So you directly own the property. You don't own the property through a third party or through a fund or through a trust. You're the one that owns the property. And under direct ownership, it means that you have full control and also full responsibility for the real estate asset. It's not just so when you're making real estate investment, you're not just purchasing a property, you're purchasing property in the hopes that you can generate returns. Some people they just buy a property to buy a property so they have it, or to build a house. So if you're building a house that you want to live in, there's no like intentionality behind generating returns or income from that property because you're just building it to live in as a residential place, right? But when you go into real estate investments, if you're buying properties with the intention of generating income and returns from that property. So if you're going to do direct ownership, that means you're buying property by yourself, either in your name or through a company, and then you are responsible for maintaining the property. If you want to um, maybe build like block of flats or commercial offices, then you're generating rental income from that. So once you purchase the real estate asset, you can use it to generate income in various ways, right? So you can either purchase land or the property and then sell it at a later time when the property or the land has appreciated in value, or even if you buy a bare land, then maybe you develop the property, improve it, and also increase the value of that asset before you then sell it. Also, rental income, like I already explained, you can buy either a land or a property, develop block of residential flats or commercial offices, then rent um, those flats, offices to other people and then generate income. So these are the common methods of income generation. But other things that people don't usually consider is that you can also offer ancillary services. So parking spaces, storage units. Storage units are not as popular in Nigeria, but abroad, like lots of people, they have business, they have land and properties, and everything is just storage units because you can't hoard things or keep things in your house like that because it's not everybody that can afford like big houses the way in Nigeria you have so many people having huge houses and then you have somewhere to store um the things that you don't use anymore, right? So storage units are more popular abroad, but they're also becoming popular in Nigeria, in Lagos in particular, especially for businesses that they have lots of goods, right? And they want to be able to store them in a safe place rather than their shops that can either be broken into or fire incidents, right? So storage units are also a great way to generate income. There's also land leasing arrangements. So if your property or your land is in like a prime area, you can lease it to advertising agencies to use them for billboards. You can lease them to um, agribusiness companies or farmers for agriculture, and cell towers, like telecommunication companies, are always looking for land to erect their cell towers and cell masts. And you don't have to lease the entire property because the cell mast doesn't take like a whole land, doesn't take the entire property, right? You just lease a portion, and then you charge for that, for the amount of years that they intend for the cell tower or the mast to be on your property. So benefits of direct ownership is that you have full control as your assets appreciate. That's general for all landed assets, like I mentioned, except there's something fundamentally wrong with that property, maybe environmental issues that cause that asset to depreciate, or like the country in itself is going through a very tough time and nobody's really buying or selling real estate assets. And so it's very useful for edging against inflation, and it's also long-term wealth building opportunities. So you can buy properties by name of your children, pass it on to your children, so you can just continue to create generational wealth from owning real estate assets. Disadvantages is that there's a higher capital requirement. So you have to have a lot of money, especially if you're trying to buy properties in prime areas. And we already know our own experience in the church and trying to get a place right for the church and how tough it has been. So if you're doing direct ownership, like you're the one that wants to acquire, you have to have a lot of money if you're targeting prime areas like, Lekki, Koi, VI, Ikeja, Bagala, places like that, because if you're investing in real estate, you don't want to buy property in areas that not a lot of people live there. So you're going to be targeting places that you have a lot of working class people or families. So you have to have a lot of money then to purchase the real estate asset. Also full liability, because you directly own that property, you're responsible for everything that comes with the property. So you'd have to manage it, ensure that it's protected, because there'll always be somebody that wants to maybe encroach on your ownership or money issues. So you have full liability, right? Also payment of all your taxes, ground rents, land use charge in Lagos, right? So you have full liability because you own it directly. There's also liquidity issues because once you buy a property, right, that property is a real estate asset, is real, is not something, it's not intangible, it's tangible. So it doesn't easily convert to money unless you're able to then sell it. Now, so if you then buy a property and then you need like urgent cash, you might not be able to sell it at the amount that you want to, especially if you're desperate for cash at that moment. Because when someone's buying real estate, there are a lot of considerations that there are a lot of things they take into consideration. Like everybody wants to do their due diligence and just confirm that your ownership is right. So it's not like, but I mean, some people buy properties on a whim, but most people would want to double check, do due diligence, and make sure that what they're buying from you has no issues. There's a liquidity issue when you have direct ownership because you can't easily turn that to cash, especially if you don't have like potential buyers on standby. Right. There's also management responsibilities, which is also linked to full liability. You have to maintain the property, especially if you're generating income through if you're generating rental income, you're going to have to do with tenants, ensure that the building, everything is up to date. You probably have to have a property manager if you don't want to do that yourself. So there's a lot that goes into maintaining a property or land when you have direct ownership. So in terms of legal considerations for direct ownership, you have to, when you're purchasing a real estate asset, you need to be able to do your due diligence, right? You also negotiate the terms of transaction documents. Usual transaction documents are your contract of sale and then deed of assignment, which is what is then registered at the lands registry. For instance, in Lagos, you register your deed of assignment at the Lagos State Lands Registry allows each state, right, as its lands registry, then the governor would consent to the transfer of title. So perfection of title is also a huge consideration. Perfection of title essentially involves 3 steps. So first step is obtaining governor's consent based on the provisions of the Land Use Act. All land in Nigeria is vested in the governor of each relevant state for the benefit of the people of Nigeria. So when you purchase land, right, you would have to get the governor's consent to that purchase, or any sort of alienation of interest in land, which is like a transfer, or you're creating a mortgage, you're creating security. You would have to get governor's consent on anything you want to do in land because the governor, right, owns land. What then happens is that we then get registered leasehold interest for a term of years. Usual term of years is 99, and you can renew it. For certain properties like industrial land, they'll usually give you 50 years, not 99. Yeah, but so 99 is the most common term of years for most people. And then for certain types of properties like industrial land, like places like in Agbara, some places in like Ogba Ikeja that they're designated as industrial zones, they will typically give you 50 years and not like 99 outright, but you can always renew when your term of years expires. So payment of applicable taxes and rates. I already mentioned ground rents or land use charge as is known in Lagos. There's ground rents in other states, but Lagos refers to it as land use charge. So there's an amount that you pay and it's different. It depends on, there's no set amount, but it depends on where your property is located and there's a way that the registry calculates the applicable rates for land use charge. So another real estate investment structure is joint ventures. So joint ventures are essentially just partnerships to ensure that you're able to purchase a real estate asset. Usually, common partnerships are you have a landowner and then you have a developer. So, for instance, I already mentioned that there's a high capital requirement when you're purchasing land. So, let's say you only have enough money to purchase land, which is like the bare land, but you don't have enough money to develop a property. And maybe you intend to develop like a block of residential flats. So, you would enter into a joint venture with a developer that would develop the property, right? You will provide the land and develop the property. And this is a very common partnership arrangement right now, especially in Lagos. Like a lot of the properties, a lot of the estates that some of us live in or some of us know about are usually developed by developers, right? They're constructed by developers. And not all developers would own the properties, right? They probably have like a landowner that gives them the property. And when it's developed, then the landowner is typically maybe either entitled to maybe a block of flats or rental income for a couple of years. It really depends on how you want to structure the arrangement. Or you have like maybe you have a developer that also owns land but doesn't have enough money to make the development, right? Then you have a financier, which is essentially somebody that provides the money, and then either it's like a loan or they provide money in exchange for maybe develop block of flats, etc. Or you agree that the money that they provided will be paid based on rental income that you generate from the developed property. So it's a very good way to combine resources because, like I said, it's not every time that everybody has everything that they would need to enter into a real estate investment structure. So I might have land, but then I don't have any money to develop. So I approach a developer, or a developer approaches me, and then we collaborate and we're able to make more money, right? Because bare land can only give you so much money. Like when you have bare land, other than the land leasing arrangements, like listening to telecom companies or advertising agencies for like billboards or mast, respectively, right? There's not much you can do with bare land. Just when you improve upon the property and then you're able to then either use it to generate rental income, commercial offices, residential, or parking spaces, different things. So most of the time you need to develop a property and you might not have money, so you just collaborate with someone that does. So there are a lot of advantages. You're able to, because it's not just you, right? And you're working with somebody else, then you share both the risk and the reward from the joint venture. You're also able to leverage on your strengths and resources, and then you can have access to market opportunities that you don't have access to. Obviously, when you're dealing with more than one person, there might be issues, especially if like your interests are not aligned, and maybe there's now issues in making decisions and then that dispute. So for joint ventures, the key thing is that your agreement is watertight. So you have a comprehensive joint venture agreement, which is what a JVA means, and then everything is clearly spelled out. Like a lawyer would always tell you, please get everything in writing. Once you have it in writing, the contract is enforceable. Like even if somebody wants to, even if there's a dispute, you have something in writing, and you can, on the basis of that, then either go to court or go through arbitration to resolve that dispute. But when you don't have something in writing, then it just leaves a lot of things to chance, and relying on statutes for implied terms that may not apply in your own case, it just makes it more complicated. So especially for joint ventures, because you're dealing with somebody else that you might not even know these resources, or they have access to certain things that you don't have access to. So your agreement has to be very, very comprehensive. You have your exit strategy spelled out. Like I want to be able to, by the end of 2 years or at the end of 5 years, I want to be able to claim full ownership of certain blocks of flats. By that time, it should have fully developed. I don't want to have to still be sharing rental income on those flats with you. They'll fully become mine. All of those things have to be clearly written out. Also profit distribution. So if you're the landowner and the developer, for instance, your JV agreement, you're saying that it's not that anybody owns anything, but that once it's developed, all the rental income generated from the assets will be split between you. So you have to state it, who is getting what percentage. If landowner is getting 50, if you're getting 50, if it's being split equally, you state it. If there's 60-40, you state it, right? So and that's when you now start to have issues on, oh, but I'm bringing this to the table. What are you bringing to the table? And then you now start to have issues, right? But JVs are very good. There's a very good avenue when you are working with the right person. Yeah, I think I should feel like that. So income generation is still the same. You have rental income, similar to direct ownership. You can all profit sharing as well and preferred returns because you're maybe, for instance, you're in the landowner developer relationship, right? Because you're the one providing the land, you can say, oh, I want to be able to get this percentage of returns from the developer before he even starts getting returns. So it's just really how you're able to negotiate and your bargaining power when it comes to JVs. So real estate investment trusts are very good avenues for people that are passive investors, people like me that don't want to be as involved in managing properties, etc. So REITs are very good avenues for someone that does not want to really be involved in knowing, oh, this is where the property is. Not necessarily, not knowing where the property is, but like you don't want to be involved in like the management or the day-to-day. So REITs are essentially trusts that own and operate real estate assets. So the trust itself would buy or purchase real estate assets, different states, or maybe if they are just focusing on Lagos, they'll buy assets in different areas in Lagos, and then you can then purchase units in that trust that would entitle you to get returns or dividends when they generate income from those properties that they've already invested in. So the trust itself would purchase those real estate assets. If it's like bare land, maybe they will purchase it and then develop something on it and then lease it out to other people. And then when they generate income from those real estate assets, they will then distribute it to all the unit holders, which is me and you, people that have invested in the trust, in proportion to how many units you purchased, right? So there are three types of REITs. You have equity REITs, you have mortgage REITs, and hybrid REITs, which is essentially a REIT that does equity and mortgage. So equity REITs are REITs that only generate income from things like rents, right? So they don't enter into mortgages or debts in order to generate income. So they purchase assets, they either lease it out or purchase assets, flip it, sell, and then the profits are then distributed to their unit holders. Mortgage REITs, they generate income through interest. So they either provide financing for like loans to people that want to purchase real estate assets, or provide mortgages to people that want to purchase real estate assets, and then they generate income from the interest payments that the borrowers would pay to the trust, and that was then distributed to the unit holders. And hybrid REIT is just a combination of both. So a REIT that does both equity and also mortgage. So advantages are liquidity, because it's essentially like owning shares. I think that's the best way. So units equals shares, right? It's essentially like owning shares in a company. When you're a shareholder in a company, you receive dividends, right? So it's the same concept for REITs. So you own units in a REIT. When they generate income from their tenants and whatever assets that they've invested in, or that they own or purchased or they've developed, they will then distribute those profits as dividends to you unit holders in the trust. And it's liquidity, and then liquidity is guaranteed because you can, if you do need money, you can sell your apart from the dividends that would come, right, if they generate profits, you can also sell your units to somebody else and get money from that. So if you're in like urgently need money, it's easy to liquidate your units in a REIT than to sell like actual property if you are desperate for cash. There's also the advantage of diversification of assets. So take for example, like my status right now as a young lady in Lagos, Nigeria, right? I might not be able to, I don't have enough money to purchase like 10 different real estate assets in prime areas in Lagos, but I can invest in a REIT that owns 10 different real estate assets in Lagos. Do you see? So if I wanted to use my own money, maybe I'll be able to probably just purchase one property. But then because I've invested in a REIT that has investments in various or own different real estate assets, then I have ownership of more assets, even though it's like a percentage in that sense. There's also tax advantages. So when the REITs distribute their dividends, either from rental income, interest income, however the income is generated, when they distribute those incomes, they're not taxed again in the hands of the shareholders. This is especially helpful for shareholders or unit holders that are companies. So typically what would happen is that, for instance, if a unit holder is a company, or you, instead of purchasing your units in the real estate, in the REITs, you set up a company to purchase that interest. Usually that income that you've gotten from the REITs, you would pay capital gains, you pay capital gains tax on it, or certain taxes that you pay on those because you've made a gain, right? You've gotten income, you've gotten profit. However, there's a tax advantage granted under the Finance Act 2021 for REITs. And when you get dividends, you're not as a corporate entity, you won't be taxed again on that income. So you pay your normal corporate tax, right, over your profits. But this income in particular, you won't have to pay. REITs would have to pay, they won't have to pay the tax and then pass it on to you. Because what will happen is that whatever tax that the REITs are liable to pay, they'll typically pass it on to the shareholders or the unit holders. And I'll talk about that more under disadvantages. So that's a tax advantage. Also, you have professional management. I might not be able to say, okay, we know the normal prime areas, but there are also people that have developed, they have certifications, they've gone to school, they understand real estate investments. So an area that might not seem like prime area to you, they can look at that area and say, this is how much money this place is going to generate in a couple of years, and they would invest right in that area. So you then have the advantage of your investment being managed by a professional that understands the market, is able to make investment decisions based on not just listening to other people, but also research and also market experience. Also, there's risk isolation. So because you don't directly, you're not like in direct ownership of the properties, then you don't have liability in that instance in terms of dealing with maybe tenants directly, property managers. You don't have to do all of that. So as I said, it's great for people that are like passive investors that don't want to be as involved in the investments that they make, and that's the kind of person I am. I'm sure some people can also relate to that. And also multiple investors can participate in one real estate asset. So the disadvantage is the fact that for that professional management, you're going to pay. And some REITs, they have high management fees, right? So you're going to then have to pay for that professional advice. But I don't think it's as much as a disadvantage, because there's also I feel like the benefits outweigh the disadvantage, except like the management fees are so high and so ridiculous that it doesn't make sense. So obviously you go for a REIT that management fees are reasonable and they're commensurate to the services that they provide. Also, market volatility. As much as real estate assets are always appreciated, that's secure, but things can always happen, right? Take for instance, things that happened in Lebanon and the entire economy crumbled. Obviously, even if your land was in a prime area, you won't be able to sell it for as much as you'd be able to sell it because there's just no money. So certain things like that, market volatility, things happen and everything's crashing. It might not be as viable as an investment anymore. There's also limited capital appreciation, because it's really how much money did you put in to purchase the unit. So if you just maybe invest maybe 100,000 or 200,000, right, you would only get dividends that are proportionate to what you've invested. So there's limited capital appreciation, except you put like a lot of money right, in purchasing those units. There's also lack of control. So if you're someone that wants to really be involved in your investment, a REIT is not a good option for you because you don't have any control over the real estate asset itself. You would, to an extent, have a say in certain things or certain decisions that the real estate investment trust will make, but not necessarily in choosing what asset they will invest in. You would sign away those rights, right, in documentation, because they can't have, imagine if they have 500 unit holders and everybody has an opinion on where they should invest in. That wouldn't make sense. And that's why they're professionals. So you would not have control over, like you can't be able to choose, oh, this is the asset I want you to invest in. That's not going to work. So there's lack of control. Obviously, you would have voting rights, etc. If there's something that they want to do and you don't agree with, you have that right to vote against certain things, but you wouldn't be in control the way you would have control if you had directly acquired that property. So legal considerations is mostly legal compliance. So real estate investment trusts are required to be registered with the Securities and Exchange Commission, which is the governing body or the regulatory agencies for operating in the capital markets, which essentially is buying and selling securities, shares, interest, etc. So REITs would have to be registered. And if you are looking to invest in a REIT, you should confirm that that REIT is registered with the SEC. That's one thing that you have to be sure of. There's a lot of assurance when you're dealing with your SEC registered REITs, because then if there are any issues, you can escalate it to the regulatory agency, which is the SEC, and they will take action, right? But if you're not able to, we see what happened to the latest Ponzi scheme. I think it's called Cybex. I can't remember the name. But yeah, it's not SEC registered, and people put in their money and then they disappeared. So, and there was nothing SEC could really do to recover the money because they don't have any oversight over that entity because it wasn't even registered. I spoke about income generation already, dividends paid through rental income, interest income, the fees that you pay, which is basically income generation for the REIT itself, and also your share price can continue to appreciate. So if the REIT is making very good investment decisions, investing in very high yielding real estate assets, the unit price or your share price in that REIT will continue to increase. The same way if you purchase shares in a company and then the company keeps on making profits, the share price increases, and when you sell, you make a profit, right? Because you're going to sell more than you're going to sell it for more than what you purchased it as. So key legal considerations, I kind of touched on some of this as I was speaking about the various real estate investments structures, but one key thing is due diligence, title verification. Please do your searches. You have to conduct search. Always I'll advise you have a lawyer do your due diligence search, especially at the lands registry. I know that there are always people at the registry that can quickly confirm things for you, but there's some key things that a layman will not be able to flag, that a lawyer will be able to flag and explain to you. Certain things like they just tell you, oh, for instance, that some properties, I think I've seen a certificate of occupancy, which is like a title document essentially that gives you ownership over a property, right? Issued by Lagos State government. And they had a clause about a 10-year restriction, basically saying that from 10 years from the date that they've granted you that C of O, you can't sell that property to anybody without first offering it back to the government to buy. Now, somebody it's not a usual clause in a COV, but there are certain COVs that have that restriction period. Now, if you just tell a layman to do a search for you, they'll only confirm, oh, is there any encumbrance, like is there any mortgage or charge on it? They'll let you know in term of years. They'll say, oh, this is the owner of the property. There's no registered encumbrances. Things like that sort of restriction now. Nobody's going to flag it for you, but a lawyer would flag it for you. So it's very important that when you're doing searches, please use a lawyer to the extent that you're able to afford such services, right? There's also court searches, which is relevant for corporate entities. So if you have, or even family, especially for family land. So if you're trying to purchase a land from a family, from a company, I would advise that you also do court searches just to confirm that there's no pending litigation on that property, because until the litigation is completed, and when I say completed is that it's gone through all the stages of appeal, because parties will always want to appeal to the highest stage, which is Supreme Court, right? You wouldn't then have that judgment would not be registered at the Lands Registry. So typically, by the time the Supreme Court has given their final judgment on a court case involving land, that judgment is registered in the Lands Registry. So when you go to do a search on a title document, you also see the judgment confirming that even though this is the title holder on the title document, because of this judgment, this is the owner based of the court's judgment. But until you have that final judgment, you wouldn't know that there's litigation when you do your search just at the Lands Registry. So I will always advise you buying from, especially family properties, because it's always very contentious when you're dealing with family-owned properties, right? Somebody is suing this one, uncle is suing that one. So it's always very important to also do court searches. CAC searches are relevant for corporate vendors. So if you're buying from a corporate entity, just do your CAC search just to confirm that there's no like registered charge, etc. over that property. Because sometimes some people create a charge over a property. They will only register it at the CAC, they won't register it at lands. They're not supposed to do that, but some people do that, right? Because they don't want anybody that does a search to be able to see that land. They'll just register at CAC. So you'd also do a CAC search if you're buying from a company, so you can also confirm, right, if there's any registered charge on CAC's records. Very important to be able to confirm that there's no encumbrances. Encumbrances are things that will prevent the person you're buying from selling to you. So if you're buying from somebody and there's a registered mortgage over that property or a registered charge over that property, it means that the person you're buying from does not have ownership, because the person or entity that the mortgage or charge is created in favor of has right to sell that property if the owner fails to fulfill their obligations, which is usually because maybe they've borrowed some money and they used that land as collateral for or security for the loan, right? So if the owner defaults on payment of his loan and you bought the property from him, the mortgagee can come and collect the property from you because is entitled under the mortgage, right, to sell the property and do anything with the property to get the money that the owner is owing him. So it's very important that you do your due diligence. Also, perfection of title, I've already gone through that. It's governor's consent, you stamp, you also register the title documents. Usually a deed of assignment, especially if you're buying from somebody else that already has like a C of O. In certain states, I know in the southeast, right? In southeast, what would typically be registered as a power of attorney. In Lagos, you can't transfer interest in land through a power of attorney, right? You have to do a deed of assignment to be able to register and get governor's consent on that. You can do a power of attorney to be able to appoint someone to sell land to somebody else. But even that power of attorney, for it to create legal capacity, you also have to perfect it. So you do governor's consent, you stamp, and you register. That's perfection of title. So it gives you confidence, because once you have governor's consent, you stamp and you register, there are certain benefits that it affords you. So if somebody does their due diligence and wants to purchase from somebody else that claims to be the owner, because you're the legal owner, you have priority of interest over that person. So anybody that buys from somebody else and that person is a registered title holder, that person is just buying for themselves because you bought from the wrong person and my title is registered. So it also certifies when you want to provide evidence as to ownership in court, and the other benefits as well. Just once your title is perfected, anybody that is buying from you has the assurance that legally you're covered. But the way things work, right? Once you register title, sometimes you have issues based off of what maybe the Lands Registry, how they operate, etc. One common thing that happens even when you have registered title is this dichotomy between federal land and state land, especially in Lagos. So certain areas are federal land. So, prime example, Ikoyi. So usually you're required, when you purchase federal land, you only register at the Federal Lands Registry in Ikoyi, right? However, if what you purchased is a bare land, by the time you want to develop the property, you will need to get planning permits or development permits or building permits essentially from the Lagos State Planning Authority. And they will not issue a planning permit until you then get state title. So essentially, go and register again at the state. So a lot of times people will buy property, federal land, they'll register only at federal. Then somebody else will sell that same property to another person. The person will go and do a search at maybe lands. They won't see anybody's title registered, and they will then go and perfect their own title at state. So now you have federal title and state title on the same property, and there are always issues about that. So every time I'm dealing with a client that owns federal title, as much as it's annoying to make that advice, I would also say go and register states, right? So basically regularize is a process called regularization at Lagos State Lands Registry. So you essentially register on that state. So the registries are supposed to work together, but they don't, right? So states will also tell you to come and register your own title. And there's been court cases. I think the court even, the judgment that was passed was that Lagos State, they retain the power in terms of like building permits and planning. So at the end of the day, even if you are federal title, by the time you want to build, you would have to go back to state and also register your title. So it's something that has not been resolved, but that's what typically happens. So you register twice. Contractual obligations, I always say you can put anything in writing as long as it's not illegal. And everything is clearly spelled out. Your agreement can say a lot of things, and that's why it's always great to put things in writing, because you can say so many things once you have an agreement written down. You can determine how your profits will be shared, who makes what and what decisions, what are the contributions that you need to make, what's the dispute resolution, what's the governing law. You can just negotiate everything in words. And by the time you've negotiated your terms, everybody has come to an agreement, you sign, that document is binding. I think what people are afraid of when it comes to entering into contracts or agreements is the time that it takes to negotiate those terms. But if you want to protect it, you have to put in the work to go through that negotiation process. Another thing that you will need to consider is financing and security interest. So if you are either obtaining a loan from a bank or any other lender to purchase that real estate asset, you need to understand the financing terms. What are your interest rates? Is this something that you can keep up with? Because a lot of people, they get loans, they don't understand how the interest rates will be calculated. Is it compounding? Is it just one? So it will just be increasing, the percentage will be increasing. By the time you're about to repay, your interest rates, right, as compounded, everything together, might be more than what your real estate asset is worth, which doesn't make sense. So you have to understand what are the financing terms, what's my interest rates, how is it calculated, how is it going to increase? Because usually interest rates might not be the same for the entire period of the loan repayment plan. Most lenders, right, they might say the interest rate remains the same for maybe the first 1 or 2 years, but by the time year 3, year 4, you've still not finished repaying, then the rate starts to increase, which is essentially an escalation of that rate. So it's basically a rate escalation. It will continue to increase. They might say it will increase by 5%, increase by 2%. And if you're not careful and you think that it's still 1% that they gave you in the beginning that applies, by the time you want to repay, and you just have like a ridiculous amount of interest rates to pay. It's also repayment schedules also tie into that. How are you supposed to repay? Do you have the right to repay your loan at once, or do you have to follow a schedule strictly? A lot of lenders, right, because interest rates is really how they generate income. The reason why people lend money is because of the interest rates. I'm lending you money because by the time I lend you 1 million, what you're going to give back to me to be 1.5 or to be 2 million because of the interest rate. Now, some lenders would say their repayment schedule will lock you in that you cannot repay outside the schedule. So as an individual or entity that wants to purchase real estate assets and you're using financing from a bank or mortgage, read the repayment schedule. There should be a right for you to repay the money at once if you want to. Like maybe year 1, year 2, you come into a lot of money. the loan repayment schedule is for 10 years. In year 2 or year 3, you should be able to repay if you want to. If you want to repay in year 1, you should be able to repay. You should always reserve that right to repay the full amount of the loan plus interest anytime you want to. Otherwise, they will lock you in to be repaying a loan for 10 years when you already have the money in year 1 or year 2 to pay off that loan. Also, consequences of default. You need to know what will trigger default. Like if you don't pay, if you miss your payments for like 1 month, 2 months, does that give the bank or the lender the right to maybe take over your property, enter your property, sell it to somebody else? You need to understand what will trigger default and what are those consequences, right? Other key legal considerations, also regulatory compliance. On each structure, I already explained some of the things that you have to comply with. Like if you buy property, you have to perfect your title because that's the only way you get legal title. So when you buy property, when you buy real estate assets and you don't perfect your title, all you have is equitable interest, not legal interest, because until the governor consents and your title document is registered, you don't have legal interest. You have equitable, essentially beneficial interest because you paid for the property. So you're a beneficial owner, but you're not a legal owner. And if somebody else purchases that same property and they go and register their own legal title, they go and register title, and they go through the perfection process and they register their title before you, they have legal and beneficial ownership. Why you just have beneficial ownership? And I mean, all of you can go to court and go and fight it out, but like, why do that? Just perfect your title when you get it. And I know that people don't like to do it because it's an expensive process. The fees that the registry assess is based off of your purchase price. So you can imagine paying 1% of 100 million naira, several fees that you pay, you stamp, all of those things. FIRS too, you pay 1.5 if you are a corporate entity, you pay 10% if you're an individual. So I understand the financial implications, but in the long run, right, the benefits that registered title affords outweigh the disadvantages. Then also, by the time if you don't also get like planning permits, compliance with zoning, a lot of people they don't know what the property they purchased, what it is zoned as. So there are different types of designated zonings, and usually when you purchase property and you do your search, or when you're about to purchase property and you do your search, the certificate of occupancy would always state what the property is designated as. Is it a residential area? Is it mixed use, which is residential and commercial? Is it just industrial? So when you then see people complain, oh, they want to demolish my property, a lot of the time, I'm not saying that every time that the demolition is like legally accurate, but a lot of the time you can trace those issues either to not having correct planning permits, or even if you have one, you got it through like the legal means by paying somebody off and the person didn't follow due process, or you're not complying with the zoning of the area in which you set up your property. So if you go and build a residential area in an industrial estate, that's against the zoning laws or the zoning applicable to that area, right? So they can demolish your property on that basis, except you then maybe approached the planning authority to approve your proposed development, because even though somewhere is zoned as industrial or zoned as residential, you can apply for a change of use for what you want to develop. And then it's a long process, but sometimes it can be granted. I know in Abuja, from what I understand, they're not granting any change of use rights in recent times, and last year, even this year, they're not granting any change of use for anybody, but it's something that's an option. Better that you do that and get their approval for the change of use than you just go ahead and just build whatever you want to build, regardless of what that area is zoned as. Tax implications as well. I already mentioned a lot of the tax implications under a structure. So you have capital gain. Once you sell property, you're going to pay capital gains tax on it, about 10%. Then also income tax for REITs, right? You pay, if you're an entity that's getting those dividends, you pay your income tax on those rental earnings. So the structure of the investment, if it's through partnerships or maybe you're using an entity or you're purchasing in your name, all of this would affect how your income is taxed. So if it's direct ownership, I'm the one that owns it as an individual, then when I sell that property, I have to pay capital gains tax. If I'm getting income from rents on that property, then it will reflect in my personal income tax when I file. If I'm an entity, you're required to pay corporate tax, right? As a company, if you're not exempted under the tax rules, you're required to pay those taxes. And then by the time you're also generating income, it will also increase the amount of tax you're liable to pay. So all of those things would determine how you want to own your real estate, right, or make that investment. There's also foreign investment restrictions. So I mentioned already that under the Land Use Act, the ownership of land in Nigeria is vested in the governor of each relevant state where that land is located for the benefit of Nigerians. So you, as a non-Nigerian, you cannot directly own real property in Nigeria. So like an American can come and then purchase property in its name in yes, in his own name, right, in Nigeria. However, you can indirectly acquire real estate. It's either you purchase shares in a Nigerian company that owns property, or a REIT, for instance, because you can purchase units in a REIT. You don't have to be Nigerian to purchase units in a REIT, or you incorporate in a company in Nigeria. That company would then acquire the property. So that's the way your investment can be structured if you're a foreigner that wants to invest in real estate assets in Nigeria. There's also another key legal consideration is transferability and exit. So you want to be able to easily sell that real estate asset and gain and make returns, or even if you're not selling it, you want to be able to generate income from that asset. That's why you're making the investment. It's not just to buy land and leave it to sit there. You're making an investment in that real estate asset to gain returns and generate income. So you need to be able to know that any restrictions on transferability. This is very key for REITs and also partnerships, because if you directly own it, there are no restrictions. You can sell when you want to sell, whatever. But then when you're dealing with joint ventures or REITs, right, you need to be able to know, do you first have to offer it to your joint venture partner before you can sell to a third party? That's basically a right of first refusal. So you have to first offer to me and I have to refuse before you can then sell to somebody else. So transferability, restrictions, exit strategy is very key for REITs and joint ventures, not necessarily direct ownership, because you own it, you can do whatever you want. Liability and risk management. Once you invest in real estate and you're starting to deal maybe residential flats, you're dealing with tenants, you're dealing with if it's a commercial building, you're dealing with office, everybody's still tenants, right? So you're exposed to those liabilities that comes with managing a property and managing people. So if there are issues, I can't count how many times I've called my landlord, this one is not working, that one is not working, roof is leaking. They will have to fix it, especially things that have to do with structural damage, like roof, the walls. As a tenant, that's not my responsibility because I did not build the building. You built it, right? As a landlord, so you're responsible for structural damage, things like maybe painting, wear and tear, usual wear and tear, the tenants. But structural things like the roof is leaking, something in the wall is not working, there's one pipe that is inside the wall that is leaking. All of those things is the landlord that they will call. And if you don't have a property manager, you're the one dealing with it yourself, it can become a lot. So that's why a lot of people don't like to do direct ownership, especially if they have to deal with multiple people at the same time, like you're leasing your property to tenants, like lots of tenants. They would rather like either do a company or pass that responsibility to a property manager, right? Or they buy to a company and that company is basically the front for dealing with that. Also, you also need to be able to shield your personal assets. So if you directly own a property, if there are any issues, maybe you sell to somebody else and then there's some issue with your title, that person can come against you directly and sue you, and then you might have to sell off other properties or other assets in order to pay that person back. But if you set up a company and then that company is the entity that sold that property to the third party, when the third party sues the company, all that the third party has access to is the assets of the company itself, because that is the title holder, not you. They're not going to leave the bill to you except certain instances like gross misconduct or fraud, right? That's when you would then the court would then lift the veil to then hold you personally responsible as like a director, a shareholder. But companies, right, have limited liability to the extent that the third party is confined to the assets of the company itself, not your personal assets. If I start up a company, Anolapo and Co. Limited, if anybody sues Anolapo and Co. Limited, the person is just suing that company, is not going to sue me. They're not going to come for whatever assets I have in Banana Island or in London or UK, whatever. They would only have access to what the company itself owns. So that's also a good way to shield your personal assets, which is why a lot of people, they don't own assets or real estate assets in their name. They usually set up companies, right, to own those assets because you don't want anybody to just have access to your own personal wealth that you've generated. So I mean, when you're investing in real estate or investing in general, there's so many things that you consider, even when just buying shares, because you have legal considerations, financial considerations. But real estate in particular, it's very important that you consider all of the factors and the considerations that I've already gone through, because if you don't do like proper due diligence, you can end up buying a property that you don't even, that the person you bought from doesn't own, that you're now in a court case, you're spending money on lawyers, on litigation, you're running elder skelter, and at the end of the day, you don't even own the property that you've wasted money on. So things like ownership verification, compliance with regulatory implications, like I mentioned, planning permits, zoning, taxes. You have to understand what you're getting into before you then make those investments. So it's very good to have a thorough understanding of all of the legal considerations that I mentioned. And even I'm sure there's some that I haven't mentioned because each investment is different, right? By the time you deal with different people and you have legal advice or you have like a professional guiding you, then they'll be able to structure advice to your particular situation. This is just like a general overview of what applies in usual investment transactions based on my own experience. So it's very important that you also have like professional legal financial advice so that you can protect your interest, maximize returns, and avoid costly legal pitfalls. So that concludes my session for today. Don't know if you have any questions or anything. I think I'll hand over to Sister Marian now. So go through the Q&A process. Thank you.
All right, Sister Anu, thank you so much. Please confirm you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you for this impactful presentation on real estate investment, structure, and concentration. I learned a lot. I learned we can lease our land instead of just leaving it there for advertisement, billboard, and to pay for it. Also learned about real estate being a fixed asset because they imply passive income. Yeah, real estate increases value over time. They are tangible assets that can be passed from you to your kids, to your grandkids. It's easy to liquidate if you are desperate for cash. We can invest in a REIT. I think I'll do that. Yes, even if we can't buy a land right now, but we can invest in a REIT. I really learned a lot, and I hope you all learned one or two things from today's presentation. So please, do anyone has a question so Stan can answer or any contribution at all? Please, do anyone have a question or contribution? Okay. Okay. So let's call on Sister Chiamaka to wrap up this session for us. Thank you.
So Marian, there are people's hands raised up. Sorry.
Oh,
Then the other link, I think, can go ahead. Then
please
after
go.
you, Ebenezer can go. Yeah.
Anisa, okay. Please go on.
Okay, did you say go on?
Yes, please go on. You can go.
Okay, thank you very much. It's been a long day, and I think Aanu has tried to put together a whole course in land and property law into a 1-hour seminar. So if your heads are ringing, or if our heads are ringing, you can't blame us. Maybe we're taking in too much in one scoop. But I think my contribution would be that property is a multi-dimensional business, and they rest on the foundation of legality. No matter how beautiful your asset is, if it sits on a weak legal background or foundation, it's going to crumble. Sometimes you even live in a house and you don't know that house is not your own until the real owner comes one day. I will have had quite a whole lot of questions, but I don't think we have that time now. But I would like to say that our knowledge and expertise of the property business is not complete if we just understand the legal consideration. I hope one day somebody is going to talk about the intricacies of even the engineering of properties, the structure of properties. Why do people build houses and after 5 years you see a crack on the wall and you think it's this maison? You've forgotten that you didn't do the right foundation. Why do people have to do, certain kind of buildings in certain places and certain kind of buildings not in certain places? Because these are mistakes we make every day. And after we have spent our hard-earned money, we begin to, it's not something you want to experience. And I don't think we have to go too far. I'm sure somebody within this church will be a faculty enough to deal with that topic. I also hope that somebody is going to, be on this same platform one day and discuss the financial implications of property. Because, I have been in a school of thought that says sometimes even owning property can be the beginning of your financial failure. It can be your beginning of your bankruptcy. You're in business, you made 50 million naira. Instead of investing your 50 million naira to increase your profit, you go and buy a plot of land in Ikorodu. Now your business is running down. Your Ikorodu property is hovering between 50 million value and 55 million value. After 1 year, you made 5 million capital appreciation. With the money, you will have made 20 million naira in business, and you can disrupt your child's education. So I think somebody will need to talk to us one of these days about how to invest and not to invest in properties. I think by the time we run around those kind of engineering rings, financing rings, legal rings, we all might be better people, better informed community. And I think and I hope that it will translate into more wealthier, more financially literate, wealthier church members. And in 5-6 years' time, we possibly have property owners in the right places, in the right amounts, and with the right vision. I think that will be my contribution. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I think I can go ahead.
Okay, thank you as well. Wonderful presentation. Great one. God bless you for the effort. My question might be a bit out of context compared to everything you've told us, but I want to know a bit about government low-cost housing estates and plans. I know some of these things that exist in certain areas of the country. What is your advice on the low-cost housing estates? What is your advice on this? And do you have any information to share regarding this?
Okay, thanks. So there are different low-cost housing estates. I think there were some in Ogba, and I know that the government typically they will develop certain areas and say this is low-cost housing, and they would invite people to purchase those properties. So a property that would typically probably be worth maybe 70 million, maybe they'll reduce it down to 20, 30 or whatever. They'll give you a discount, or you have payment plans to pay over a long period of time. So I think that government low-cost housing estates are good ways to invest because you're getting your title directly from the government, right? So it seems safer in a legal sense because if you subscribe for those low-cost housing estates, your perfection is essentially fast-tracked because you're buying directly from the government. So if you don't really need to do due diligence verification because you're buying from the government, right? But the issue with that is because of the way Nigeria is set up and then we have corruption. There are several government low-cost housing estates that people have used as money-making schemes. So they say it's a government low-cost housing estate, and then they either just give it to people that they know, or you apply, you're there, you're just waiting. Like, it doesn't really go far. So if it's properly managed, it's a good investment structure, good investment option because you're buying directly from the government and it's safer in terms of legal title. Another thing is the way governments work in this country. There's usually no continuity. So let's say a governor finishes his term. By the time another governor comes in place, they might cancel that scheme, right, or cancel that program. They're not supposed to be able to do that because once something is done by the government is supposed to be a continuous agency. It's just that the individual people that run the government change. But the government itself is a continuous agency. So if the government puts something in place, it's supposed to continue. But the way things work in Nigeria, that's not usually the case. So I think those are the things you need to consider. But I would say that they're safe because of the guarantee of your legal title. So you're dealing directly with the government. You don't have to do so much verification because it's government-owned property and they're the ones that own it, right? But there's also the risk, which is applicable to every single thing that we do in life. There are also risks because particular, right, to Nigeria, and maybe other schemes work better abroad. I don't know, or other countries, but particularly to Nigeria, the way we know the way our government runs, we know the roles that people play. So that might just be the risk, and that's what might trip you up. And also, if that property, even though it's government property, but that maybe somebody is suing them in court for that, because sometimes the government will acquire property, and even though they have the right to do so, maybe it was not done properly, or you are not, or the person they acquired it from was not properly compensated or not compensated at all. That person can sue and they will keep that land essentially in court. So if you then buy that property and maybe the court holds that the government cannot acquire it or something, or the rightful owner is this other person, and you've already bought from the government, then you have to deal with that fallback. It's not very prevalent or very common, but it's a possibility. But I still think it's a safe avenue. I can't say examples of schemes that are ongoing right now, but I know that there are different schemes that are run by the government. We have the LSDPC where they set up they have different schemes in different areas, for sure urban, certain areas like in Agege and other areas where I can't list out all the other ones, but yeah, I'll check if I can find a link to a list and I'll post it on the group chat afterwards. I hope that answers your question, Ebenezer.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. I don't think we have any more questions, and I apologize for the overload of information, right? But I hope that it was still easy to understand. We have a short time, and I didn't want to, cover as much as possible. So even if you just have a broad understanding, you just learn one thing just to verify title, I think that's enough. You don't have to retain everything. And also, you see me in church every Saturday, so you can always ask me questions after Sabbath, or you can reach out to me on WhatsApp if you have personal questions or specific questions based on your own experience or what you're trying to do. I know that some people have also reached out to me before and I've always responded. So I'm always open to provide advice. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for the contributions. Also about what Mr. I said, while people acquire property and then they lose it afterwards, just as Sister Anu said, go for your due diligence, investigate, verify information, make your research before making any significant decision. I feel people don't do that. That's why they lose at the end of the day. So, anyways, thank you so much, Sister Anu, for everything. And let's call on Sister Chiamaka to wrap up this session for us. Thank you. Sister Chiamaka, please, can you hear us? Confirm you can hear us.
I don't think she's
Oh,
doing. So maybe we
oh,
just
Yeah, I don't think Sister Chamaka is online, so we'll just go ahead so I will not drag on the